Greetings gamers, Tim here again. It's been a long while, I know. My old camera had stopped, they don't support it anymore, I had to get a new camera, and then life kind of got turned upside down with my mom's health and a variety of other things that just have happened. Plus, I really hate shooting videos while I have this mess behind me, and I don't really have any other place to put my computer or to move that stuff. Although I am slowly reorganizing it and getting it sorted, so it's going away. It's just taking me a long time. Somebody commented on my video, said they wanted to know my process. Well, and here, it's basically my process. It's not very complicated. In general, it's pretty easy. The first, and that's the most important thing, is to get an idea. Where the idea comes from is not so important. It can be a game you play and you thought you wanted to pursue something in that game that's not well supported in that game. It could be you read a book, a fiction book, or saw a show, or enjoyed a very specific genre of things that you're interested in. It could be westerns, it could be sci-fi, it could be post-apocalyptic, and you get that idea. And I'm going to tell you two things about this in the process. Your idea will absolutely not be by itself original. Since mankind has started writing, ideas have proliferated, and that proliferation pretty much means any kind of idea you have, someone has thought of, at least in some form, and tried before. Whether they made a game of it, that might not be the case, but that does not mean you can't put originality in your game, in your product. That is the important thing, is that you are the important element in your design. And how you take things and how you interpret and how you twist things to make them your own are very important. So you can start with that idea. Excuse me, I need a drink. Realize that you're going to be doing work. It's not just, oh, it's all fun and games. Even writing a game, it requires work, it requires effort. So you get the idea. That's stage one. And you bring yourself to it, which is an important step. Because just having an idea, a stray idea, a thought out of the blue, doesn't actually create the game for you. So you have to bring yourself to it, embrace it, and go. Step two, in my case, is to research. Because when I find something, I want to see if, not only if anybody has done something like it before, but how they attempted it, either as a game or in fiction. I want to study whatever the idea is inspired by. For example, one of the games I'm working on has Chinese wushu fiction elements and feng sheng bang elements. If you don't know what those are, wushu elements are the wire fu martial arts, the running on top of bamboo and fighting with your kung fu skills, and sometimes extremely fantastic elements, but still about humans. Feng Sheng Bang takes that and turns it up to 11. It's about demons and gods and that. And those two things do not necessarily follow different paths, but there are different kinds of works in between them. There are some that lean entirely into Feng Sheng Bang and some that lean entirely into Wushu, and then there are ones that are somewhere hazy in the middle. So when I did that, I start looking for fiction. I start looking for other entertainments that are related. I look for games, and there are games on Wushu. I have not found any games on Feng Sheng Bang. And in fact, I've been working on the game as a Wushu game when I was talking to a friend who is Asian, and she brought up the genre of Feng Sheng Bang, and I hadn't heard of it before. Pardon. So I started researching that as well, because that adds a whole new element. Now, the uniqueness I'm bringing to this is that I want to do it as a different genre. It will still have the Wushu heart, but it has different trappings around it. And the Feng Sheng Bang heart, but different trappings around it when I create that game. And I've been doing work on it. Now, for me, the research stage usually involves looking up the fiction, starting usually with books, um, reading that. If the books or the genre have supernatural elements, I will often look to the originating culture of that genre and try and look at their mythology and their supernatural stuff. I don't want to just put elves and dwarves in everything. I've seen so many steampunk games that you're like, oh look, this is a Victorian era fantasy game, and oh, there's elves and there's dwarves. They don't need it. They could just be about humans. But for some reason, people like the elves and dwarves, and they stick them in there. And there's nothing wrong with that. In the course of things, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just I've seen it a lot. And it gets to the point where it's like, okay, somebody try something different. And there are some out there. But when you start doing this research, start thinking of the elements you want to include and things you expressly you want to reject. For example, in Hearts and Souls, my superhero game, one of the things I wanted to reject was the early era comics racist issues. So, for example, the first heralded public superhero that you have in my setting, in the one that I'm including, especially in second edition, because I didn't touch on it in first, but I am hitting it hard in second edition, is Dr. Velocity. Dr. Velocity is a super speedster, and he is black. He is African American. And the reason I did that is because I'm creating something new. I do not have to follow the failings of the forebearers of the entertainment that I'm drawing from. And I can reject or keep any parts I like. It's been done in a lot of games. I know that at least some iterations of Pendragon reject that knights have to be male, so you can play female knights in the setting, which I approve of, because inclusivity for me is somewhat important, because I want my games to be for everyone, not just the people who look like this, and are culturally raised as, a white American from the south part of the Americas, well, not South America, but the south part of the United States, rather. But you know what I'm saying. The third thing I do is I start, even though I'm looking for research, is if there are games in that research, I put them off to the third stage. I find the games that are doing things in the same genre, in the same field, and I read them. Superhero games, fantasy games, sword and sorcery fantasy games, hard sci-fi, transhuman sci-fi, cyberpunk sci-fi, post-apocalyptic sci-fi, weird fantasy, and so on, and urban fantasy, and so on and so forth and so on. Because I don't want to do exactly what they do. So I do the research on the genre and the idea that I have. I then come to the games as the third step. Look at them and see if any of them have rules that I feel are important, interesting, and different. And what do you mean by different? Well, I mean that they do something that none of the other games also do. And I look at them and I think, okay, is this something that I need to do at this point? Realize that I have done work up to this point, and I am secondly guessing myself as to whether I need to do it. Because if I find a good enough game that does what I want, do I need to write one? Probably yes. Even if I like it, it's not mine. It's not my original take on things. But, and that's what I mean by in step one about originality, is bringing originality to it. This is where it's important. You look at what other people have done, if there are any, and try and do something different. You try and do something different with rules, you try and do something more, I don't want to say innovative, but more interesting, more you. Because there are lots of games out there. There are hundreds, like in the 90s and the 80s when I, like way back, we had maybe 5 in the 80s. Like big ones in the early 80s. We had like maybe 5 games. It was Tunnels and Trolls, there was D&D, there was Traveler, and maybe a few more. But those were the big names you found in places. And once you've looked at those games and you've accepted and looked at elements, and rejected elements, you then sit down and, depending on the way your brain works, you can write an outline, or you can start throwing mechanics at the wall. Now, my path has usually been to throw mechanics at a wall, because that is where the heart of your game is going to function. Your setting is going to be pretty much all you. You're going to be writing something and creating something, but it doesn't have to have as much work as the game elements of it, because it is a game in tabletop role-playing. The thing is, and there are a lot of people who don't need games. They don't need the rules. They can just role-play on a server, Discord, or something somewhere, and they're just, oh, I'm going to be this character and you be that character, and we'll role-play. That's not really what I like to do. I like to have a character. I like to create it under a set of rules. I like to embrace the rules of the game, and I like the game elements of the game, but they're not the most important. When I throw mechanics at a wall, I test them out. I'll make a simple scenario. I will run myself through it. I will see how that works. Then I will rope in a friend who's a gamer and say, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? I have a lot of contacts online. I don't have as many as people who go to cons, but unfortunately I am too poor to regularly go to cons. So for me, I rope in a friend, usually a near friend, but sometimes they're friends online, and I say, can we try this? Let's try this. And I give them the basic mechanics. And one of the important things in this step is you're going to start looking at how the mechanics engage with a character, because you can't actually test the mechanics very well unless you have that iconic element of the character to interact with them. I have a friend who runs interviews, basically question and answers about new games. This friend and I don't see eye to eye on everything. He likes different things than I do, which is fine, and the Q&As sometimes are good. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to be interested in this, and there's some things I'm like, I really love this idea. But one of the things I do during the Q&A, if I'm there, is ask them to give me an examples of a character jumping over a crevice, a ravine or something, from one side to the other, or a rooftop to a rooftop, or anything similar to that. Because at your basic level, this is something that can happen in many games. You have a character doing something. And it's an easy way to see how the mechanics engage with the character. What do they do? How do they do it? What resources are they drawing upon? Once I have the basic mechanics for making a character in order to interact with the rules and the basic rules, I will start playtesting. It's very early alpha testing, which usually means roping in some friends, having them make some characters under what I have, and running it. Currently, I'm running a game inspired loosely by Simon Green's Night Sight series. He's got multiple books in that setting, and they all tend to interact with each other, like the Newton-Wold universe. If you're familiar with that, or you're not, look up the Newton-Wold, Newton-Wold, W-O-L-D, which is these interacted characters, very much the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen before the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen existed in many ways, but it's this big interconnected series of fictional ideas. And in Simon Green's universe, he's got some elements of that, and I wanted to do something with it, so I came up with a way to do characters and what the mechanics were. And I've been playing with them as we play. I've been changing them. What I did for this system was I set up that characters are described by 5 traits, by basically a set of resources and a reputation. Because reputation is how they interact with other characters in the setting. And that seems to be an important part of the Night Side, because at least the main character of the core Night Side books is a private eye, but he's a private eye that for some reason his ancestry scares people. His reputation, basically, because they know his mother's reputation. Whoever she is, they won't tell him who she was, but his very existence scares people. And that was important to the feel of the game. Of the character types we have a person who possesses puppets, and exactly what he is I know, but nobody else does. I have a everyday normal reporter who nobody believes, that's his flaw. because I added flaws to the game. You know, what is your flaw? What causes you trouble? And I have a super shapeshifter who can take on any form they want, which I have offenses to use against them. And later on, those three characters added a fourth, which was a voodoo Hungan, however that's pronounced. I'm sorry if I mispronounce it, please forgive me. But basically a voodoo practitioner, worshiper, who lives in his van and drives around. And the van is one of his assets, one of his resources. And it's been crushed and recovered and a lot of different things. It's been fun. But then I start these mechanics and I run them on a few little adventures. Not just, okay, roll this to see what this happens, that we tried at the very beginning. And we tested out. Well, the system I'm using is a D6 pool system where you have, each trait has up to 5 dice. More than 5 dice can be bought later, but at the beginning of the game, 5 dice. And 5 dice is a big thing in the game, okay? You gotta understand, I'm not wanting to go beyond like 8, maybe, total. And 8 is truly epic in this setting. And characters start out with at least one 5 trait. And it's D6 pool, so you roll D6s. I start out as this, we're just going to add them together because that's the easiest way to use them, and it prevents things like I've seen in some games where you're rolling D6 pools and picking out certain numbers, and for some reason you still fail despite having a huge dice pool. This one, since you add them together, you can still fail, but more often than not you're going to produce some kind of result that is closer to success than not. Because you can't just get nothing where you could in the other method. I originally started out where if you roll a 6, you get to roll one more die as an exploding die, just one. If your whole pool ends up 6s, you still only get to roll one. But then I decided we're just going to let it explode completely. Meaning you roll a 6, you get to roll again. If you roll a 6, you get to roll again. If you get a 6, and that happens for every die you roll a 6 now. And that creates some really, truly world-shaking kind of things that happen in the game. And it's fun. I probably need to come up with some more rules for interacting with people, because I don't have anything hard-coded for that yet, just the trait system, which can be all you do. I mean, you can have a system that just does that. But I want to have a little more structure to it, a little more how-to as well to describe it. Assets in the game allow you to flip dice up, meaning if you roll a 4 and you need that 6, you can take the 4 if you have an asset of 2 and go beep beep and have 6. It doesn't get to be rolled again like an exploding die. And so I play test this, and I look at it, and I play test it, and I play test it. And we're going to run this game for a while as it is, and I may go back and change it entirely, or I may keep that structure and add little elements to it to refine it. Because that is just a basic dice mechanic on its own. It's not a full set of mechanics. It's just a dice mechanic. And that's generally where I start. I know what characters should now look like to some degree. I know what they should have and they should share, which is reputation. Not the same reputation, but they all have reputations. And they all start with a high reputation. They all started with several dice in reputation, because that's fixed. Because I wanted them to be movers and shakers in the setting. You could make it where they can be anywhere along the line if you want, using my game when I'm done and finished with it. I don't know if I'll ever publish this. I just know that that's what I'm working on now and testing. Because I wanted something that leans towards focusing on the story, but is still fairly traditional. And there are lots of different kinds of games. There's traditional games, there's games that are narrative, there are games that are more simulation, there are more games that are more game rules focused, and there are all sorts of mechanics that go with that. I have seen games within games, which is just a big mess. Look, if you're putting blackjack or poker as a mechanic in a game, you have gone too far, in my opinion. That's just personal opinion, but it slows down the game. Lots of game mechanics slow down the game, and I don't like slow. I like the result. I like you to go A, B, C, done. Like almost that fast, that we have stated what's going on, the players are doing what they're going to do, the dice or mechanic is engaged, and we get the results. I used to call it FIFO, fast in, fast out. You get into the situation quickly, and you resolve the situation quickly. This is not the mechanic, of course, found in the world's biggest role-playing game, which is Dungeons and Dragons. It is not FIFA, not at all, because the combat system is intentionally designed to be slow and methodical, to give everybody opportunities to engage and make a difference in the conflict and support one another. And that works for you. That's its thing. That's an important element that game wanted or needed or was created, even if it was accidental, that has been kept through the years. I like games that move fast because I want the game to be played. And I want the game to be played out. I want us to be able to have an adventure in one night. And not have to drag out because there's a fight that took the entire game. Because I've seen that. I've seen versions of different games, and not just D&D, where player characters get in a fight in an early adventure. They fight, and the next 4 game sessions of 5 to 6 hours are them fighting that same fight because of how long it takes to engage from getting into the situation, using the mechanics, and getting an outcome. And that is not FIFA. And I like FIFA. Fast in, fast out. Because for me, I want to see where the story goes. I don't have a big plan. I mean, I have ideas. I'm like, oh, here's the thing. Let's see what happens. But one of the important things as a game writer, as a game designer, is that I like to follow what the players direct me to. Now, the next step, which is basically step 4 at this point, is to write this stuff down. Now, I've been taking notes this entire time. And if you don't, you will run into my biggest mistake. I created a Western game for a one-shot. That was brilliant to my mind. It may not have been great play tested more, but it was brilliant. And now I can't remember the mechanics because I didn't write them down after that first session. And it was idiotic not to. So now I take prolific notes. You take notes, and whether you wrote an outline before or you're just shooting from the hip, it doesn't matter. But at this point, I start breaking down the mechanics in a sort of outline form. Step A, you do this. Step B, you do this. Step C. Because that is what's going to form my rules document when I put it down. From character creation to engagement with the various mechanics that I create. And you start writing it down. And then, while I'm doing this, I go back to the fiction with these mechanics and look for examples where it seems to fit my system. Does this describe what could go on in the fiction if it were a novel? Does this describe the fiction if it were a movie? Does this describe, is it possible to get this situation, as you see and read or engaged with, happen in the game as the mechanics function? If you have one without the other, if you have the fiction doing something that game mechanics can't do, then it's flawed and you need to work on it. If you have something the mechanics do that you don't see, you may have to trim that out. Now, that's not a requirement, that's just a suggestion, because you're doing something that seems to be not adding to the game in any real way. It's just there, it's hanging on by itself. Then the next step in the process is, for me, is a really weird process. I start looking around for art. I usually commission an artist who's a friend of mine for 1 or 2 pictures that I can use as inspiration for my design, and buy them, pay them. I don't use AI for that. I don't like it. I feel that AI is stealing from people. I'm not entirely against AI, ethically used AI, without stealing from people, being used to prototype something. But for actual inspiration into what things I want to put in my game, I want art drawn by a human being. I want something created by a human being. And that's important. And I know there are game companies out there and game people who use the machine learning things to put art in their games, and I'm kind of against it. It tends to look the same. I tend to be able to pick it out very easily because I have done a lot of looking at it, and it doesn't always get things exactly right. So I'm very cautious and not all happy with it. But I do. I get a real person and I get to commission some pieces of art so that I can go back and look at them and go, this is what I'm aiming for. This is a shape. This is something that will go in the book. And usually you have to get a contract at this stage with the artist that you can publish it. And I highly suggest that because it keeps you both connected and it keeps you both ethical. And, generally just a good idea, even if they are a friend of yours. And if you can do art on your own, if you can draw your own stuff, great. I used to be able to draw some ideas down for prototyping, but I haven't been able to very much lately. It's just very frustrating. Then the next step we move on is basically start putting all the notes together into a rules document. Then I basically hand the rules document off to someone to read and tell me, what am I missing? What is the next thing? What am I not describing here with the rules? What does the genre have? And I have a friend who has written 3 editions of her game. Fantastic friend, good person. She has 3 editions together. The first edition of the game was a little clumsy. I liked it. I liked elements of it. But when she was writing number 2, she would ask me questions because we interacted a lot back then. She's got a real day job that she can't do that as much anymore. But at the time, she had enough time to ask me questions. And I kept telling her, go back and look at the fiction you are drawing from. The game in question is Cartoon Action Hour. It's a wonderful game. Season 3 came out a few years ago, which is 3rd edition. But I kept telling her, go back. And if you ever happen to have picked up the 2nd edition of Cartoon Action Hour, you will see her talking about me. Not exactly bad-mouthing me, but been saying that this man is stubborn, and he would not let me let go of this fact. And I wouldn't, because at the end of the day, I'm not her competition. I am a fan. And I've had people call me competition when I was trying to be honest with them. And I don't see myself as their competition. I don't see them as my competition. I see them as fellow people creating in the same space who can support each other. Because there's room in the gaming world for just about anybody who wants to write a game, as long as it's acceptable topic matter. I'm definitely against racism, sexism, all that jazz, all the isms. So, if you're writing that, I don't think there's room for you in that sphere. You have to find another one. I'll kick you out myself. But more importantly, the main thing is that at this stage is that you get your creativity in there, and you keep going back to your notes, to your fiction, to your genre, and you stay as true to that idea that you first came up with at the very beginning as possible. There have been games where I started writing, I lost sight of both FIFO and the other thing I usually say, which is keep it simple, stupid. And I don't mean that to other people. I may tell them KISS, but I don't mean that they're stupid. I mean that I am stupid some of the time. Keep it simple, me. Okay? And so I have to go back and walk myself through, okay, does this work, does this work, does this work on all the stages. At that point, it's just a matter of sitting down and writing it, and that is probably the slowest part. For me, I take a very, very long time to create games compared to some people. I know people who have turned out games in a few weeks. I have a friend who turned out a game, Atomic Highway, and it seemed like he started working on it and it was done. And it's got good writing, it's well done, the rules are great. It's one of my favorite games for post-apocalyptic fiction. There's some issues, but it happens. But the truth is at that point you're doing the work. You've done the work the entire time, but you're doing the hard work, and you're going to have to come back every day that you can. Understand, I have reasons why it takes me forever. I'm a bipolar person, and I have depression, and it's just one of those things that I have to work through to get it out there. And at that point, then it's just finding the resources to publish the game, because honestly, and I very highly recommend this. Hire artists, hire editors, hire proofreaders. Proofreaders are not the same as editors. A proofreader is going through and looking for things like spelling mistakes, major things like the editor is fixing those things. They're going to give you need to change this, you need to change this, you need to change this, but they're not doing it the same way a proofreader does. A proofreader is basically making sure that the writing is good in a certain level, and the editor is looking at the writing as fitting the point, basically as doing the same thing as a proofreader, but at a different level. And the more you do that, proofreader and editor, the better the game will be. The last two steps in that is once you've got it written, once you have maybe assembled the artist and got them working, if you've got the resources by this point, which hopefully you should, and you could reach out to other people, because some people will help you. People like me will try. I mean, I may not be perfect at it, but I can certainly make suggestions. I'm not an artist, though, and I'm definitely not an editor. I could proofread, though. But when you're doing that, the next two stages are important, and they've been drilled into me by somebody who's been in the business much longer than I ever was. And that is an index. Make a good index. And a good index is not just the headers of your chapters. That's a table of contents. You don't even need a table of contents, although it is helpful and nice to have, to be able to look at the chapters. But the index will tell you literally, on these pages, and there may be a dozen references or 50 references to the same concept, same name, same rule, same mechanic, same function, whatever you're putting in the index. There may be 50, and you put all 50 in them, so that the person can go through and go, okay, this is what I'm looking for. It helps if you have some subcategories for that, to help make it easier to group them together in smaller amounts. But the other thing at the end is then basically my reading list. What books, what ideas, what things did I use to come to this point? High Valor does not have many, because a lot of what I'm doing is just folklore, and I can't point to any specific folklore in High Valor, like books, because there are lots of them. In Hearts and Souls, my superhero game, I picked very standout superhero stuff that I liked. I didn't necessarily pick out everything that was world-shaping in comics, just what I liked, what went into the game for me. And there are somebody who probably go, well, you didn't include this. Well, sure, but I didn't like it, or I didn't want to include it because it didn't shape my perception of the genre. And that's about it. That's my process. And I may go through that process multiple times and have to start over. And never be afraid to go back and reconsider what you have done. That's one reason second and third editions exist, is to improve upon what you've done before. Even if you publish, you can go back and fix things, make them better. Hearts and Souls was definitely this. Hearts and Souls was, at the time, the best I could do. It's very simple. It's very KISS and very FIFO. But it does not have all the detail that I can put in the game. High Valor does. Hearts and Souls second edition will. I mean, it does. At this point, I'm just looking for somebody to write the examples, because I'm stuck. I mean, I've got some of the examples written down of how to use the rules, but I'm not really good at turning the rule speak into this character does that in a descriptive prose manner. So that's where you have it. And if you're great at writing examples, that's wonderful. It's great. And I have been able to do it sometimes. Sometimes I've done great examples. For Hearts and Souls First Edition, I did a wonderful one. I was complimented on it by somebody. I didn't think they even knew who I was, and they looked at it and said, this is great, this fits. I'm like, well, thank you. Okay, that's good, and ran with it. But at the end of the day, you're done at that point. You just publish it. And I tell you, in this day and age, don't look for a publisher to publish work for you. You can work with people to publishers who want to work with you, but there's not many that will take your idea and publish it for you. I had friends who helped me with Hearts and Souls. I had friends which helped me with High Valor. And they are technically published by other people. You know, they published for me. But that is more of a business side thing. And you don't necessarily have to have that. It makes it easier on me. Anyway, this is a long video, so forgive me, but that's my process. Peace, love, good gaming, blessing, be well.